Okay, hello everyone. We will start off with your CA final risk management classes today. Risk management being your elective paper is called your sixth paper, and we will have these lectures purely in English, so we ideally might use some Hindi vernacular words in between, but that might be just an occasional one because of the habit of using those in common parlance. But in general the classes would be purely English based. That's what we intend to do in these lectures. Before we start off with the discussions of the subject, the first few minutes I'm going to be discussing with you overview about the subject, overview about how to approach the paper, and about a general overview about the subject and the contents that we are going to be discussing in this paper. Risk management is a paper that has a lot of similarity, or let's say a lot of content from different subjects of CA curriculums. So your CA final old syllabus had a subject called ISCA. Yeah, it's an English word only, short form for your subject name. That was ISCA. ISCA is what he used to call it in short. So CA final ISCA was a paper that was there in old syllabus that was removed and the electives came in, but some content is there from the elective from ISCA syllabus that is there in your risk management paper. In your new syllabus CA intermediate, you had a paper called EIS-SM. Okay, a lot of you might have studied that from me only. EIS-SM was a paper where you had an EIS part that was earlier an IT related part. Now the newer version had a lot of IT and ancillary areas covered into it. So that EIS part, a lot of topics have come from that area into your CA final risk management. Obviously it is a paper that is connected to finance, because that is how we will kind of relate our discussions as well. So this will also have a lot of connections with finance. So financially we will have connections to Inter-FM, Inter-EFF, EFF Economics of Finance paper. We will have connections with respect to SFM paper. So strategic financial management, SFM is one of your like main papers in finance in group 1. Risk management paper will have some connections and similarities to that as well. So we will have a lot of subjects that will have some kind of a connection with this paper, and yet this paper is going to be very unique and important because in our common life we all do risk management. Frankly, you and I, every one of us does risk management. Sir, how so we don't do proper risk? All of us in our lives do some things to avoid certain risks, or we take risks to gain some kind of a benefits. Risk managements we will discuss. I'll go into the subjects, but risk management is something that we all do in our lives. It's something that we can all connect to, relate to, and that is why this is a subject that will have a lot of value, and especially if you want to make a career in finance. So like today's world, if you read papers as well, newspapers, lot of companies have risk management departments, risk management committees. It's become mandatory for companies to set up risk management committees beyond the threshold limits. Obviously, I'm not going into the law parts right now, but what I'm trying to make you understand is there are a lot of companies who are coming up with risk management committees. A lot of them because of statutory requirements, a lot of them because of their own choices. Now, that is where we as qualified chartered accountants come in and play a more pivotal role, because we will have that additional informations, additional knowledge that we will be able to apply. Risk management committees, we will have a lot of discussions here. So what does a risk manager do? What does a risk management committee do? All that is there in our detailed discussions in our syllabus here. Okay, moving on, just keep listening while we keep discussing about the paper and the overview about how we are going to be discussing. That's going to come up after this. Now, paper 6 is an open book examination, as you would be knowing. So what does an open book examination mean? So I can take ICI Math, I can only take ICI Math, you can take any content. No digital content, no digital content in the form of, let's say, you can't use mobile phones, you can't use any kind of digital devices, but you can take any printed notes with you. Okay, that is allowed, that you can take any kind of printed notes with you in the examination halls. That's allowed. So ideally, while you go and sit in the examination halls, you can carry your ICI material with you. You can carry, we issue a material to you as well. So at CA final risk management paper, we have created a separate mat for you guys. Okay, that's called the risk management companion to examination hall. That Companion to Examination Hall is another book that will be available to you guys. Those some of you might have already received it, others would get it very soon. But that book is also going to be very, very helpful for you. Apart from that, we will also discuss some kind of other handouts that you can carry with you. So you can carry any kind of material printed that you want to carry with you, with any kind of write-ups, markings on it as well. Oh wow, sir, then so it's a fantastic opportunity for us. I can carry any kind of material with me, and I can do just look up in the papers and find my answers and just write it out. Had it been that easy, obviously this paper would have had a totally different response from everyone else. Just to give you an idea about it, this paper, initially when the electives came in, a lot of people felt that risk management was very easy. Risk management was very easy. Then suddenly a lot of people started saying risk management is very difficult. Risk management is very difficult. They're not giving marks. They're giving tough papers. It is all, personal perceptions. If you ask me, that will also be my perception basically. But if you ask me, I think what has happened is the paper has become standardized. It's not become tough. It's not become difficult. It's become standardized. So ideally, I think the papers earlier had more direct questions from the book, which is obviously not the idea of an open book examination. Ideally, an open book examination is supposed to test your application of content, application of the knowledge, rather than ask you to play treasure hunt from the book, find it in the book, and then write it in the answer sheets. That's obviously not a CA final student is expected to do. And if you're getting marks by doing that, then that's obviously a big question mark on the examination pattern as well. So obviously that is not something that is being expected from you as well. Obviously there will be some portion of the paper that will be direct as well for us, but in general, if I say, if in a general level, if I talk about it, believe me, the paper earlier had, let's say, maybe 50% of the paper was such that it could be answered based upon ICI material directly. The questions were direct. Moving forward, what has happened is, slowly that percentage has come down. So people feel, sir, we have to apply so much of knowledge, so much of mind. How do we find it? How do we do it? This is becoming very tough for us. Nothing. What has only changed is, let's say out of our 100 mark paper, we obviously have an options with us as well. So we will have about a 125 mark paper for us. Now out of that 125 marks, keeping aside the MCQs obviously could be direct as well. They could be obviously applied as well. But even in general, if I talk about the 125 marks total as well, I expect personally that about 20% of the paper, that's about 25 marks still, 20% of the paper would still be direct, at least absolutely direct. Give us advantages. What are the functions of the risk management committee? Direct, absolutely there in the book, absolutely there in the question paper. Just pick up and vomit. Not like the broad headings. Obviously they will, what ICI is normally habituated to doing is, they will pick up the lines above the bullets and then ask you a question from it. So the same thing gets done. So don't expect the broad headings to be asked. That would be like too lucky for you. But they might pick up a line above the bullets and give it to you as a direct question with a direct answer in the ICI material. 25 marks out of 125 marks, I expect it to be as direct as that. 25 marks, I expect. About 30 marks of the paper, 30 marks, about another more than about 25%, another 25%, I expect the paper to be application, or let's say application question where the answers would be more direct. Application questions where the answers would be direct. So what do you mean by that? It means that you will have to think, understand, interpret the question. You will have to think, understand, interpret the question, and based upon that, you will have a direct answer in the ICI material that you can look up and answer. The question will not be direct. The question would want you to think, understand, interpret, and then answer, but the answer would be directly there in the ICI material. So at least about 40 to 50 marks of the paper, will be such which you can answer directly based upon ICI material. That's what I'm trying to tell you. About 40 to 50 marks of the paper would be such which you will be able to answer based upon ICI material. Okay. Out of the rest of the parts, numericals. A lot of people have a fear about numericals from this part of the subject. Sir, how many numericals will be there? Sir, numericals, please understand, we don't expect too much of a numericals. I expect the numericals to be maximum around 15 marks, maximum about 15 marks, average around 10 marks, 8 to 10 marks. So you may expect like one proper numerical and a few MCQs, or maybe two proper numericals, or a worst case maybe 15 marks. So it's a pure theory paper. That's what I keep telling people. It's a theory paper, like an EISSM paper where you had a flowchart at it. Okay, where you had a flowchart in it. This is a case where instead of you having flowcharts, you will have just one practical topic, which is got to be like a few practical topics, which is about like 10-15 marks. That is how the paper is going to be standardly presented to you. Now, remaining, sir. Remaining. So we have discussed about let's say about 70 marks of the paper. Another 40 to 50 marks, the remaining about 40 to 50 marks would be such which you will have to answer based upon the case studies and your understanding of ICI material. You will have to answer based upon the case studies and the understanding of the ICI material. So which is why for studying purpose, I think the best material is only ICI material. For studying purpose, I feel that the best material is ICI material. So what do we do with the ICI material, sir? We learn it up. Obviously, don't even think about it. We don't need to learn anything from the ICI material because it's an open book examination. The book is going to be with you in the examination hall. So, sir, what do we do when we prepare? All you have to do is know two things. One, concepts should be very clear with you. Two, you should know which topic is placed where in your material. Again, you should know two things. You should know your concepts well, and you should know where the topics are placed in your material. That's all that we need to prepare for this paper. So how do we do this, sir? When we do the classes, when you're doing this classes, ideally, if you are attentive, you will understand the concepts in the session, and I expect you to give me some time before your next session. That's what I will always do in each session. I will ask you to just read up a little and come. So if you're giving me that much of parallel time, the conceptual understanding would be, I assume, clear to you. We will be conceptually clear and comfortable. The next is understanding what topic is where in our book. So I expect you to revise about thrice. I expect you to revise the entire topic, the entire contents about thrice. 3 times before the examination halls. So we would do it parallelly once with the classes. You're doing it in the classes, parallelly once back at home, once in the last 1 month before the examinations. Those are going to be your 3 revisions, and then you finally do it in 1.5 days before the examinations. Once you've done it about 4 times, you will definitely have an understanding where the topics are placed in your ICI material. Once you have done the topic 4 times, you will definitely have an idea where the topic is placed in the ICI material. Beyond that, what you will also have in our material, the SKC material that we give you, the companion to examination hall, you will also have there the option of second part has a chapter wise mapping. The second part of the book has chapter wise mapping, where all the key topics of the ICI material, not just the broad ICI mat headings, okay, that would have been like an index of ICI material. That's not what we are giving you. All the key headings, all the key topics, and within that all the broad main areas that we're discussing in ICI material, all that is given to you in that book. So all that is given to you in our book in a last part of the material where the proper mapping has been done. But don't look up to the mapping first time in the examination hall. It does not help you because obviously you've not looked at it before. So what you should do is, one, when you are revising yourself at home, parallelly with the classes, open the books, or if you have not received it by the time you're starting off with the classes, that's not a problem. Once you start off with the classes, suppose that once you get your book, you can then accordingly maybe just drop in and go through it. But parallelly, I would want you to see the material once, and when you revise in the 1 month before the examination halls, obviously we will do it together. So we will revise in the ICI material and again look up in the SKC material for the chapter wise mapping, so that I am comfortable with the chapter wise mapping, so that in the examination halls, when I have a direct question, or let's say if I have been able to understand this question relates to this topic, I don't need to search the ICI material where the topic is placed. We will directly look up in the SKC material, find out in the mapping part, and then go straight away into the ICI materials. The SKC material also will have chapter summaries. So what is the benefit of the summaries? It helps you in revising in the 1.5 days. It helps you to look up in that one in the examination hall and in the 1.5 days. So it will help you definitely. Now, how do you use that is totally got to be upon your strategy. We suggest when you prepare, you should always look up to the material that you want to look up in the examination halls, because we don't want to look into new things in the examination halls. Everything that I carry with me, it's an open book examination, everything that I'm carrying with me in the examination hall should be something that I've seen earlier, that I have prepared earlier with, that I'm comfortable with, so that when I look up to them in the examination halls, I don't need to be searching. I should be very thorough with the positions of the material, or let's say the content in those materials as well. Okay. While we approach the paper, I will strongly recommend to you that do not get into the typical studying pattern of learning things as is usual for us. It is best advisable to you that you get into a comfort zone of understanding the concepts thoroughly, and let's broaden our horizons to understand in totality, so that when and relate the topics of different chapters together. So what happens is, I'll tell you, we often have a habit of studying topic question answer formats. Here you do not know the questions, and there is no comprehensive list of questions that can come for you. It's an open book. So your preparation should be where you are able to collate the content that you are learning at different places of the subject. In fact, in our book we will have a lot of topic that will be repetitive at different places as well. So that is where the knowledge has to be joined together, synced together, so that finally when I'm asked questions, I'm able to apply my knowledge of different chapters together and write my answers, especially in those 40 to 50 marks of case study and ICI math based questions that we will have to tackle. Okay. Okay then. So we've discussed the paper handling part, the paper structure part for you. Now when we get a case study for us, it is going to be very important. The entire paper is a case study based discussions, where you will have about 5 case studies. Each case study will be 25 marks, and for each case study you will have about MCQs 10 marks and 15 marks of descriptive question. That's how the 40-60 breakup will be there. Now 4-hour paper for you, so you will have an extra hour, but don't be happy that you will have an extra hour, because you will have to answer 4 case studies, and ideally each case study would take more than an hour. So 4 hours is not like extra time. It's got to be just enough if you are able to finish in right time and do the classes in the right amount, do the case studies in the right amount of time. Because what happens is, each case study reading, it's going to be long case study, so each case study reading would take about like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe 20-25 minutes. And then that's not like a one-time reading that would be sufficient. Sometimes the case studies would require certain portions to be reread multiple times. Then to be able to understand, pick up the question, write the answers, MCQs you have to think, tick. It takes time. Each case study can take an hour, a little more as well. So 4 hours, a lot of people think will be enough. Sometimes it is, if you are able to get the questions quickly. Otherwise, sometimes it can be a little neck to neck. So don't get easy with the paper. It's very important that you solve papers. It's very, very important for us that we handle case studies. We know how to handle case studies, and we have done sufficient number of practice with case studies, so that when I am bombarded with new case studies, I am not like in unknown waters and I am stranded. How do we do that? Practice a lot of case studies. How are we going to do this? We will have separate sessions where we will discuss a lot of case studies, and all those case studies will be available to you. We will discuss a lot of earlier term papers. We will discuss a lot of earlier mock test papers. We will have a lot of case studies for you. And we will suggest you that you should also carry those case studies with you. We will have those handouts for you as well. So where in those case studies you will be able to, a lot of times what happens is they have a similar case study that was there in an earlier term mock test paper or an RTP. Okay, it's like an earlier term papers. I have had a similar kind of a case study, and that will automatically, it's not going to be same case study but similar. It helps you to handle those questions. If you have solved those papers earlier, it's gonna click, it's gonna click. That's why it's very very important to solve a lot of papers. Believe me, even currently the Jan 21 examinations, one of our students was able to score 77. Okay, and she was very clear about the fact that, sir, I only had stuck to your guidelines, studied from the ICI material only, and it was sufficient for me. Obviously SKC material was there, that was helpful in the examination halls, but mainly focused on ICI material. And believe me, I think there is nothing better than ICI material. I will have my knowledge to share with you. I will have the ICI material that we will discuss in the classes together, but there is no other material that is required. SKC material will help you, but we don't need to study from other materials per se. So ICI material and some supplementary materials to help you, like the mock test papers, like the SKC materials. That's got to be comprehensive for us for exam perspective. Okay, let's move towards the subject then. We have had sufficient discussions about how to prepare. Now we will finally move towards preparing with you about the subject. So sir, the subject is risk management. I'm going to break up the subject. So we will discuss together what is risk. We will discuss together what is management. We will discuss together what is risk management. I'm going to give you an overview of the chapters that we are going into. So I am still not starting off with the content. My discussion still is on a generic level only. ICI material, we will have 9 chapters. Okay, we will have 9 chapters in our material. Starting from the first one, just to give you an overview, the first 4 chapters explain a process. The first 4 chapters explain a process. So 1, 2, 3, 4 we will definitely discuss in that order. So why? What is the process? You know, to go into that, let's start with the first thing that you should know is what is risk. The first thing that I'm discussing with you is what is risk. Okay, your opinions about it. Okay, different people have different I would say opinions about risk. Lot of people think risk is bad, risk is something negative, risk should be eliminated, risk should be avoided, risk means loss. Is risk equal to loss? Think. Is risk equal to loss? No, absolutely not. What is risk? The first thing that you should know is risk is an uncertainty. So risk is something that is not certain. So that everything that is not certain is risk? Obviously not. Reverse is not true. Risk is uncertain, but everything that is uncertain is not risk. Obviously, there can be anything that is uncertain, that is not risk for us. Okay, risk is uncertain. Okay, so risk is an uncertainty that is not certain for us. Risk, there are different definitions of risk in our book. There are different definitions of risk across the world. I will discuss certain characteristics of risk, certain things about risk with you, because I have to explain the words risk management to you. I have still not started my chapter, but I'll still be starting my chapter without starting the chapter, if you're getting what I'm trying to say. Okay. Risk is the possibility Risk is the possibility that a threat will be able to exploit vulnerability. Risk is the possibility that a threat will be able to exploit vulnerability. So what are these words that you're mentioning? This is a diagram that I often draw in the intermediate levels also. EISSM, CA final, ISCA students have studied this with me, and obviously the risk management students also study this with me. Vulnerability is a weakness. Vulnerability means vulnerable. Vulnerability means a weakness. Threat is any kind of a agent that can exploit that weakness. Threat is any kind of a agent that can exploit that weakness. I'll give you an example. So let's say if I keep my cash box open, I don't do that, but if I keep my cash box open, it's a vulnerability. Why? It's a weakness. It can be exploited by unwanted people. Okay, it's a weakness. Threat is any kind of a agent that can exploit that weakness. So those unwanted people, chor, okay, thieves, those unwanted people would be threats. But 1 minute, if you have a weakness and if you have a threat, it does not mean you have a risk. It does not mean you have a risk. Either of them does not make it a risk. But when both are present, then risk arises. So what do you mean by that? If I keep my cash box open, but if I have protected myself from all kinds of unwanted people, or let's say if all the people around me are so trustworthy that nobody thinks what you're thinking, you getting now? So then obviously it doesn't matter. Even if my cash box is open, even if I have a weakness, that weakness is there. It doesn't matter. If I have a very strong immune system, then even if I am attacked by harmful bacteria and viruses, I will not fall sick. Harmful bacteria and viruses are like threats. They can harm me. But if I have a strong immune system, if I don't have any weakness in my body, I will not fall sick. Reverse, if I have a weak immunity, but if I keep myself protected against all kinds of harmful bacteria and viruses, including the viruses that have been recently keeping everybody at home. So if I have kept myself protected from all kinds of harmful bacteria and viruses, I will still not fall sick. But if I have a weakness in my immune system and if I am attacked by harmful bacteria and viruses, then I will catch cough, cold, flu, etc., etc. You get the etc., etc. The possibility of this happening is called risk. If I am having my cash box open, it's a weakness, but if all the people around me are trustworthy, the weakness will not be exploited. It's not a risk for me. On the contrary, if I am constantly surrounded by thieves, people who are on the lookout of exploiting weaknesses, but if I have very strong controls, they will still not be able to harm me. But if there is a weakness in my controls, and if I have unwanted people, thieves around me, then they will be able to exploit the weakness and cause losses for me. All I'm trying to make you understand is that for risk, you need to have both. You need to have a threat and you need to have a vulnerability. Only when you have both, then you have the possibility of an attack happening, and that attack will lead to exposure. So what is exposures? It is losses, the losses that you would face if something like this happens. So the possibility of this happening is called risk. The possibility of this happening is called risk. So risk is the possibility that a threat will be able to exploit a vulnerability, leading to losses for the organizations. Risk may be positive or negative. Risk may be positive or negative. Now this is we have a lot of discussion on this in chapter 1 itself. Is risk positive? Is risk negative? Risk can be positive, risk can be negative. Sir, if risk had only negative connotations, then risk would mean loss. But risk can also lead to profits. If there was no chances of risk, why does the finance world say high risk, high returns, profits? So if risk is there, there is also chances of profit, there are also chances of loss. But there have to be chances of profit as well. That's what we're trying to say. Risk may have negative implications, but it may also have positive implications for us. Risk cannot be just negative. Risk may be negative or it may be positive. Okay. We're discussing the word risk with you. So what is risk? Risk is, I would say, uncertainty. A lot of people say risk is the possibility of deviations from expectations. Risk is the possibility of deviations from expectations. That is why the finance world, you used SD as a measure of risk. So where are you going, sir? We were studying risk management, agreed, but we are also discussing some connections. SFM connections are there. So in SFM, we have discussed, we have studied that one of the measures of risk is standard deviations. I will not go into that right now, but obviously we will have discussions about that later as well. So risk is a possibility of deviations from expected values. That's another way of putting risk. Risk can be interpreted in different ways. There are several definitions in our ICI material as well. We will read them together. Obviously, we don't need to learn them together. But if you're understanding the term risk, it's an uncertainty that may be positive or negative. General mindset of people is negative. General mindset of people is negative. In fact, more times in this book, we will use the word risk in negative sense than in positive sense. But hindsight, you should be very clear that the risk may have positive implications, that the risk may be positive. You should be very clear about this, that should be there in your mind. Though formally we will only, major part of the syllabus also we will talk about risk in the negative sense only, but it may also be interpreted in the positive sense. Risk can be deviations from your expected values, from standards as well. That's risk. What's management? I am sure since childhood you studied this word management, school days. Now obviously school days is your childhood days. So since childhood we have studied what is management. I'm sure you will have an idea. Go ahead. Management. Even if you're doing the videos, you should talk to yourself. That's what makes the videos worth it. You know, otherwise if you're just constantly staring at me, beyond a point of time you tend to get distracted, bored. You will not feel that, you know, that concentration levels will not be there if it's just one way monologue that goes on. So talk to me as if you're doing a live class, even if you're doing a videos. Okay, so going ahead, what is management? You should be saying the answers to yourself now. Childhood days we used to say management was 5 things, sir. Management was 5 things. What was 5 things? Management was planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling. Management was 5 things: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling. Sir, we studied that obviously. Now anything, for simplified languages I can say management of anything is like setting a target, taking actions to achieve the targets, setting a targets, taking steps to achieve the targets, evaluating whether the targets have been achieved, monitoring whether the work is being done properly, and if there are deviations we take, corrective actions. Risk is about setting targets, ensuring that your targets are being achieved, constant monitoring and ensure evaluations, and if there are deviations we take corrective actions. That's management. Risk management, risk management, risk management. So what is risk management? Risk management is about managing risk. Wow. Risk management is about managing risk, sir. It means it's about setting targets for risk, ensuring that those targets are being achieved. I'm just joining the words, setting targets for risk, ensuring that the targets are being achieved, and if there are deviations we take corrective actions. And if there are deviations we take corrective actions. We evaluate, monitor, ensure that the targets are being achieved, and if there are deviations we take corrective actions. So management we said was risk management I'm just noting down whatever we're discussing. I'll give you some time to copy as well. I'll finish the discussions about risk management and then I'll give you some time to copy as well. But I'm just noting down things what we're discussing here. So then, sir, what will be the exact steps, actions in risk management? What would be the exact steps, actions in risk management? Ideally, if you understand, our focus would be business perspective, goes without saying. Even in your personal life you will have risk and you will do risk management. Even in your personal life you will have risk and you will do risk management. But the discussions in the material in our classes would focus majorly on business risks, on the business side of risk. So we will discuss more relating to business, though it may also relate to personal lives, and we may give examples, instances in between as well to you. Steps, actions in risk management. Now keep listening. Ideally, understand, every person, every business is exposed to various kinds of risks. If I start with the personal lives, you will have various risks in your life. God forbid, we would never want, but we may not be able to clear the exams. Worst cases, we're discussing risks. We may fall sick and not be able to go and sit for the exams. We may hurt ourselves, fall down, have an accident. The various kinds of risks that I am exposed to, that are possible. Now, every human is exposed to various kinds of risks. I am exposed to a meteor shower attack risk. So what is that? What is that? A meteor falls from the galaxy, sky, cosmos, space, and falls on the earth, and falls exactly on your tower, on your building, on your place. Probability, I don't even go into measuring, but it's there. We are all exposed to various kinds of risks in our personal lives. Corporate world, we're all exposed to various kinds of risks in a business. So what kinds of risks are we exposed to in a business? I'm exposed to risks like bad debts, changes in market rates, interest rates, stock prices, raw material prices, output prices, finished goods, services, changes in prices. I'm exposed to operational risk. So what is operational risk? Day-to-day operations related. So my machines may break down, my key employees may have a problem, they may fall sick, they may go on a strike. Day-to-day operations related risk. The vendors may go on a strike, they may not provide the raw materials on time, the customers may not be able to come. Bad debt related risk could be the law of possibilities, different kinds of risks. Fire, natural disasters. We are exposed to loads of various kinds of risks in an organization. Do we know all of them? No. So what do? We first have to find out what are the risks applicable on my organization. I first do what? I find out the risks applicable on my organization. We identify the risks. Why? Because we don't know what are the total risks. Tell me something, like I gave you various examples. I'm sure if you're connecting with me, you'll understand of all the risks that I'm mentioning, some would be more dangerous, more important. Some would be less dangerous, less important. For a petrol pump, credit risk would be negligible. Bad debts risk, credit risk of default, bad debts. For a petrol pump, the risk of bad debts, the risk of default, credit risk would be negligible. So why? Because majority work for them is cash basis. They would hardly have credit. Very few. Major part of their business is cash based. As compared to that, a bank, the entire main business is credit, to give loans, to give credit. So a bank will have much more chances of a bad debts default as compared to a petrol pump. Why am I giving you these examples? Is to make you understand that the risk is not equally important for every organizations. Some risks may be more important, some risks may be less important. So how do you judge whether the risk is more important or less important? I'm coming to that in 2 minutes. But firstly, for example, if I sit in Calcutta, the chances of a tsunami or a flood or any kind of let's say the flood or a water based attacks, let's say flood, tsunami, would be greater as compared to if I sit in maybe New Delhi. Logical. If I am sitting in Japan, I will have greater chances of a earthquake as compared to if I'm sitting in Kolkata. I'm giving you instances, but try and connect through the instances that the fact that all the risks are not equally important for everybody. So what do? We assess the risk. What do you mean by assess, sir? We assess and understand. We do an assessment of the risk and understand how important are the risks. In fact, we will go ahead and do something called ranking of the risks. Rank them in the order of their importance, priorities. What is more important, what is less important? Assess the risk, understand, identify, and then assess this. What are the risks more important, what are the risks less important for me? What are more important, what am I going to do? Take immediate actions. What are less important, I will decide. I'm coming to that in the next step. But when I am assessing the risk, the assessment is based upon two parameters. When I am assessing the risk, the assessment is based upon two parameters. So what are the two parameters on which you base the risk assessments? So one is the likelihood or the probability of the risk materializing. One is the probability or the likelihood of the risk materializing. And the second is about the amount of loss that I would face if the risk materializes. And the second is about the amount of loss that I would face if the risk materializes. We will assess the risk based upon two parameters: the probability of this happening and the likely exposures, the losses that I would face if the risk materializes. Probability, exposures. Okay. Now, probability of the risk materializing and the likely losses, exposures that I would face if the risk materializes. That's how I assess the risk. That's how I rank the risks. Some risks may have high probability, 90% chances of occurring, but if they occur, loss is 100 rupees. Chances of occurring is 90%, but if it occurs, loss is 100 rupees. As compared to that, some risks, the probability may be only 10%, but loss is 2 crores, only. The probability may be only 10%, but losses 2 crores. So for some risks, the probability may be lower, but the exposures may be higher. Or the flip side, certain risks, the probability may be high, the exposures may be lower. What do? Consider both. So we need to consider both the probabilities and the exposures and then assess the risk and decide what risks are more important, what risks are less important for us. That's how you do assessment of the risks. Once we have assessed the risk, we will do perform risk management. So what is risk management? So I will select and implement the right risk appropriate strategy for risk management. So for some risk, I may put some controls. I'm not going into the terminology today because if I go into controls, I will have another half an hour of discussions into controls. We have a lot of discussions relating to controls as well, so I'm withholding that for me, but I'm sure you have some knowledge about controls. You guys who've studied and girls who've studied controls in CA final levels, CA intermediate levels, we have thorough knowledge about what is control, so I'm holding that back. Okay. So For some risk, I may decide to implement controls. For some risk, I may decide to transfer the risk onto third parties. So how do you transfer the risk onto third parties? Simplest examples, I take an insurance. I transfer the risk onto a third party. For some risk, I may decide to just avoid the risk by not taking that activity or not doing that activity where I think the risk is too high. Or if I feel that the risk is minimal, it's not that important, I may accept the risk. So I may reduce the risk by putting controls. I may transfer the risk onto a third party, insurance. I may avoid the risk by not doing the work where I feel there is too much risk. Or I may accept the risk and accept it that okay, we will have to accept some risk, because if I don't take any risk, if I eliminate all risk, all I will earn is RF. So what are you saying? Sir, higher the risk, higher the return, lower the risk, lower the return. If you eliminate all risk, all you earn is RF. Then what is the point doing business? Put the money in FD. There also there is little bit risk. The idea being, if you're taking risk, you will get better returns. But for that you need to take risk. If you're doing a business, don't eliminate all risk. Then there's no point doing a business into it. So when we're taking risk, we will have higher returns. But for that we need to take risks as well. Okay. So coming back, I will either accept the risk, avoid the risk, reduce the risk by putting controls, or transfer the risk onto third parties by using insurances. I will identify my risks. I will assess the risk. I will select the right risk management strategies and implement those strategies. And then I will evaluate and monitor risk management strategies. So whatever strategies I have made and I have implemented, I will evaluate periodically and see, constantly monitor and see that my actual risk is properly controlled. See, there is something called a tolerable risk level. There is something called a tolerable risk level. So what is a tolerable risk level? That's called your risk appetite. This word is going to come several times. Sir, appetite, kitni bhook hai? How much hungry are you? Okay, so that's called your risk appetite. Now, risk appetite is called your tolerable risk level, is the maximum level of risk that I'm willing to take in my business. That's your risk appetite. We measure the actual risk levels, put controls, and bring it within my tolerable risk levels. That's another way of definition of risk management. I will set my tolerable risk levels. I will set my risk appetite. I will then measure the actual risk levels that may be higher. And then I will put controls to bring it within my tolerable risk levels. Whether it can be through avoiding the risk, reducing the risk, transferring the risk, but whatever, I will reduce it within my tolerable levels. After that, I will constantly monitor and ensure that the actual is within my tolerable levels. And if the actual goes beyond the tolerable levels, I will again put controls, additional controls, and bring it back within my tolerable levels. Risk management is also about ensuring that your actual risk levels are within your tolerable risk levels. Risk management is also about ensuring that your actual risk levels are within your tolerable risk levels. And if there are deviations, as we say, we take corrective actions. Okay, so we will evaluate and monitor the risk management strategies, whether they are all working properly, whether the actual risk is within my tolerable risk levels, and perform corrective actions, or let's say take corrective actions if necessary. So it's like a 5-step thing. Monitor is more continuous, evaluation is more periodic. Set the risk appetite, measure the actual risk, take steps to reduce actual risk to risk appetite levels, take steps to reduce actual risk to risk appetite levels, monitor, evaluate to ensure actual remains within tolerable, actual risk remains within tolerable risk, and take necessary steps if the actual risk goes beyond tolerable rises beyond tolerable risk. Okay,